Omarion Hampton has officially signed his rookie deal, meaning there will be no holdout and he'll have a chance to hit the ground running as he tries to take over as the Chargers' starting running back.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Droegemeier, and we've been covering the Chargers together now for 9 seasons, but this is our 7th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen. To make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Well, Daniel, the first round pick of the Chargers is signed, sealed, and delivered. Omarion Hampton is now officially under contract. And what are the expectations going to look like for him in his rookie season? And we know the Chargers really love Rocket Sanders. How far can he skyrocket up the depth chart for the running back room? And Greg Roman, a lot of people out there got a lot of things to say. Is he on the hot seat if he has a bad season this season?
I think the other thing is just, can he get the running game back on track? Because it's the thing he is most known for. If you're Greg Roman, you have to at least have a good running attack. And that is what leads us to this Omarion Hampton situation and why it's important that he signed today, because he is one of, if not the biggest hopes the Chargers have for improving that rushing attack. And according to Jordan Schultz, the Chargers and running back Omarion Hampton have agreed to a 4-year, $17.77 million contract, including a $9.56 million signing bonus. The number 22 pick out of North Carolina is officially locked in with Jim Harbaugh and the Bolts, or officially locked on, depending how you're looking at it. But, David, what this means, we know he was going to sign. It was only about when he was going to sign, and we've covered the Chargers long enough to know that there's been some disputes with former first-round picks, most notably Joey Bosa, where guys aren't always where they need to be right when they should be, and signing those contracts right off the bat. And a lot of it had, and especially in Joey Bosa's case, had to do with deferred contract language and injury protections and things of that nature. And it feels like the Chargers haven't had that recently, especially with the last couple of first-round picks. And that is important because, no pun intended, it gives him the chance to hit the ground running. And if you are Omarion Hampton, you're going into training camp as RB2.
Yeah.
Period. He has to go take that job. Now, I think they will give him those chances. You took a running back in the first round. You're saying something and you're sending a message with that pick, even if he was just the best player available. And it's hard for me to imagine that Najee Harris is going to disappear. But you need all of this time. All of these things are important. So to have that rookie contract done, to know that there's not going to be a holdout, I think is significant, and it really puts the Chargers right where they need to be right now.
It does. No holdouts, no distractions for the team or for Omarion Hampton as he starts to embark on his NFL career, which I think is the right way to go about it. Like you said, he is trying to be the number one guy for the Chargers in the backfield, and that's going to take every single bit of time that he is afforded. That means being on the football field. That means being in the playbook. That means, going out there and trying to take advantage of all of the snaps that you get, because, hey, Najee Harris is a veteran, and he's, his resume is 4 straight 1,000-yard rushing seasons. So he's not going to just give it up. He is not going to just hand it over. Omarion Hampton's going to have to take it, and he doesn't need anything that's holding him back whatsoever. The money side of the NFL is done. The contract is completely signed, sealed, delivered, as I said. So now he can focus on the business of getting better at football.
Which is the whole point at this time of year. And also it's about earning the trust of your coaches and giving yourself all the chances you can to do that. And if you remember what happened with Joey Bosa when he held out, and we remember it well because it was what we talked about on our first ever time covering Chargers football. We were talking about Joey Bosa's holdout. And what ended up happening with that is he held out. He ended up signing very late, I think after a month-long holdout. And he immediately had a soft tissue injury, pulled the hamstring, and ended up missing the first 4 games. And I think some of that, too, was also just due to conditioning.
Yeah.
Like, he had to rehab from the hamstring, and then he had to get up to NFL game shape. For Omarion Hampton to have all this time, to not be worried about it, to be with Ben Herbert in the weight room whenever he wants to, I do think is significant, especially when you see around the league the Bengals' first-round pick, Shamar Stewart, who's holding out, and also not participating at all in those rookie practices, which is kind of crazy for someone with 4.5 career college sacks. But that's neither here nor there. A lot of the times these things happen, it has to do with, at least from the perspective of the running backs, cheap ownership, right? Or from these players, it's about when they're going to be guaranteeing money, when you were going to get some of the signing bonus and all of those things. And the Chargers, who had kind of a history of being thought of as cheap ownership, they would fight on some of those things and not just kind of give in. And we haven't seen that from them lately, which I think is a positive development, because you can actually kind of connect the dots and see how it would affect these players, right? And how much missing some of this time would be detrimental to what the Chargers need to do this year, especially with a first-round pick, especially with someone who is going to be tasked with helping improve this Chargers running game. And now it leaves 8 of their 9 draft picks signed, David, leaving only Trey Harris as the only unsigned rookie so far. So I think that's a good point to be, and I'm also not worried about that either.
Absolutely not. I mean, as we were talking about before the show, Trey Harris has been at all of the voluntary workouts. He's been present. He's been on the field. He's been participating. And so, I think this is just a matter of time for the deal to get done. I'm absolutely not worried about it. I'm sure in the very near future, it will be done. And then the whole class will be under contract.
And I think it's probably even more significant for a wide receiver, because you want to be getting those reps with number 10 as quickly as possible, right?
And as often as possible.
Yeah, so that number 8, number 9, number 10 connection can get going as early and often as possible. But what are the expectations for Omarion Hampton, who's picked in the first round by this team? Maybe it's time to temper them a little bit. Let's hear what we have here from Beyond Eon.
I'm Locked On Chargers. This is Beyond Eon. You probably recognize me as the person who gave the buy or sell if the Chargers would have a new number 1 running back by the end of the season, in which I called correctly because Omarion Hampton will be the new number 1 running back for the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, Daniel and David, I want to know, buy or sell, Omarion Hampton will be the leader in rushing yards for all of the AFC West, even over Ashton Jeanty. Thank you, guys.
Now, it is a buy or sell Tuesday, getting into the biggest Charger storylines and overreactions, and I'm going to have to side with the overreaction part of this. I have to sell this just because it would be disingenuous not to, right? And I do think, putting aside the skill sets and who's better, who's more talented as a player between Omarion Hampton and Ashton Jeanty, what it's going to come down to is opportunity. And I just said it in the last part there. Like, it's hard for me to imagine, even if Omarion Hampton wows and takes over the starting role, they're both going to have a role between him and Najee Harris. I can't see Najee Harris completely disappearing. Whereas Ashton Jeanty, David, isn't going to have those problems as far as the split in the backfield because of the overwhelming amount of talent outside of him they have in that Raiders running back room.
Yeah, which is not very much. So Ashton Jeanty's going to be the number 1 guy right off the bat. He's going to get the lion's share of the carries. And I absolutely love the confidence, and I can't wait to watch this kid run. I think he's going to be a major asset. He's going to help the Chargers close out games. He's going to help the Chargers win football games. I wholeheartedly believe that. But Ashton Jeanty is going to get all of the carries all the way up front. It's just what it's going to be. And, no matter how, confident that we are that Omarion Hampton is going to be a big part of the Chargers offense, he still is going to have to earn those snaps. And Najee Harris is definitely going to be RB1 until it is taken from him.
And that's not to say that Omarion Hampton can't be RB1. But the thing is Ashton Jeanty is probably going to get 250 plus carries in 2025.
Wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, I don't see Omarion Hampton getting that. And so even if you think, okay, well, Omarion Hampton was actually the better prospect, which is a pretty hot take in general, because we're talking about a dude who was a top 6 pick. Those things come with different expectations. And I think in the unique situation that Omarion Hampton is in, having someone that has 4 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons sharing the backfield with them, it's just a little bit different. So I think you have to temper your expectations. We'll get into kind of, maybe some buy or sells on what the rookie totals could be, whether it's rushing yards for Omarion Hampton, receiving yards for Trey Harris, and what else, all the other rookies too. But I wouldn't expect him to be the best running back in the AFC West or the most productive. Now, if he gets that role early, as far as getting the most carries in this offense, could it be second in the AFC West? Could he be second amongst rookie running backs? I think that's very doable and something I might buy if we were doing that buy or sell. But we still have more great buy or sells to get into. And we love talking about the Rocket, Raheem Sanders, and his chances about potentially making this team. But will he have more carries than Hassan Haskins? That one's actually tougher than you might think. We're getting into all that and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, I need to tell you guys about FanDuel because it is the best time of the year because the playoffs are going on to be betting on sports. And with the NBA playoffs in full swing, every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a time that's better to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, and the fans have more ways than ever to be able to bet on all of their favorite teams. And with the NBA playoffs going on, this is what I love. On there, you can get great parlays and same-game parlays to be able to hit huge totals, and they give you the numbers that you need to make those. Anthony Edwards tonight, over 25.5 points. Shai Gilgeous, over 31.5. Julius Randle, over 19.5. Same with Jalen Williams. Chet Holmgren over 14.5, and Jaden McDaniels over 13.5. The good news is all of those guys average within one stat of those through the playoffs. So it's not that crazy for them to be able to do it. And you can get that at plus 4,221. So if you want to go big, you can do it with FanDuel. And if you're new, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet to get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. David, let's get into more buy or sells here because it is Tuesday, getting into the biggest Charger storylines and overreactions. And thank you to the Everydayers for your contributions. If you don't hear yours on today's show, we'll be doing a mailbag later on in the week because we have a big interview on Friday with Locked On SEC to talk about all of the guys from the SEC the Chargers have now, especially the rookies like Rocket Sanders. So make sure you guys come back for that because we'll probably sprinkle in some buy or sells on that show as well because we had a lot of good ones today. But let's start with this one from Luca Neal, who says, buy or sell, Rocket Sanders will get more carries than Hassan Haskins. David, are you buying or selling that?
The Chargers absolutely love Rocket Sanders. It's very clear with how they're talking about him, how they're treating him, in the organized activities that they're at, the voluntary, programs that they're setting up. But they also like Hassan Haskins too. And Hassan Haskins is a Jim Harbaugh guy as well. So, he had 34 carries for 89 yards. Not a lot, but also you have to factor in Kamani Vidal's carries as well. And he had 43 carries. So for kind of like that third, fourth running back, I feel like if Rocket Sanders is able to stay healthy, if he's able to show out in the preseason, like he's going to have to, move himself up the depth chart. We know that they definitely like him, but I'm going to sit here and say that I'm going to buy it. I think that he is going to supersede them, which means he's going to have to push one of those two guys off of the roster.
So that's the interesting thing here because I think there's a sentiment that it's between Hassan Haskins and Rocket Sanders for potentially that last running back spot after Omarion Hampton, Najee Harris, and Kamani Vidal, who was a 6th-round pick only last year. What security that gets you as a 6th-round pick is very hard to say because he was underwhelming in his rookie season, and part of that's because of the lack of opportunities. But I think as far as Haskins' role, really all he was a short yardage specialist. That's all he was last year. That's why he averaged 2.6 yards per attempt, was because of the roles and the situations they were bringing him in. Now, hard for me to imagine you're taking either of those top two guys off of the field in a short yardage situation for Hassan Haskins. You have two hammerheads. You have two physical players in Najee Harris and Omarion Hampton. Those will probably be your short yardage backs this year, especially with Gus Edwards missing time last year. Hassan Haskins was that guy. Now, Hassan Haskins' special teams value is going to be really hard to beat out as an RB4. And the way the Chargers did things last year as far as their roster went was Kamani Vidal was inactive for a lot of the games, and Hassan Haskins was active. It didn't mean they liked him running the football better necessarily, but it meant as that third running back who's active on game days, they wanted to see some special teams value out of it. So I think there is a chance that Rocket Sanders is vying more for Kamani Vidal's job than Hassan Haskins' job. But if Rocket Sanders makes the team, I absolutely believe he would have more carries than Hassan Haskins. But the two big dogs are going to eat, and most of those carries are going to go to Omarion Hampton and Najee Harris, which is how it should be. But Speaking of special teams, this is from Champagne Vinny on Instagram, who says, buy or sell, Rocket Sanders will be a kick returner for the Chargers this season. This one's interesting because I don't know if he'll make the team, but I think if he were to make the team, this will be a great avenue for him to do it. So I would buy this if he makes the team. He will be a kick returner for the Chargers, even though he doesn't actually have any kick return experience, or really nothing at least significant.
Yeah, he had one return for 19 yards in his entire college career. So there's not a lot of experience there. However, as good as Darius Davis has been as a punt returner, which he has been, I would say above average, he has not been very good. Obviously been an all-pro, right? But not been very good as a kick returner. They haven't got a lot of explosion there. And Rocket Sanders does have 4.46 speed. So he does have some ability to get down the football field. Probably a little bit of a different style, obviously, than Darius Davis, being so shifty and so quick and fast. But yeah, I mean, they could definitely stand to get or try to get some more production out of that avenue, because, hey, you get some of those hidden yards in the special teams area where you got a shorter field, that could help you win some football games.
And I think the thing about him not having the experience is, first of all, it's not that hard. I mean, easy for me to sit here behind this computer and say, obviously, but we've seen other players take it on as pros, even if they didn't do it in college, because the thing is, a lot of these guys that are on these teams were star running backs of their programs when they were in college. They weren't going to be asked to do kickoff return duties, where Darius Davis was always one of the best return men in the country when he was at TCU, and you knew he was going to bring some of that. But to your point, he was 17th in return average amongst any return man with at least 10 kickoff returns last year at 27.6. He was 4th in punt return average and with those same measures, right? So I think that he is an all-pro punt returner. Could he be superseded? Could he be replaced as a kick returner? Yeah, I think so. Or at least, there's two guys back there a lot of times making these anyway. So when you're talking about a dude at his size with 4.4 speed, that's a good body for a kick returner. So if you're going to try to vie for a roster spot as an end of the roster guy, just like Hassan Haskins, you're going to have to prove your special teams value. So if you can find that as a kick returner, absolutely, you go and show them that you're the best kick returner on this team, and that might be your best avenue to make this roster. But we still have more big-time overreactions and storylines to get into, including potentially the return of an old friend, J.K. Dobbins, who's still sitting out there after the Chargers gave him an unrestricted free agent tender. What does that mean? I know that's what Kevin wants to know.
Aloha, guys. This is Kevin from Honolulu. My buy or sell is that the Chargers end up being able to re-sign J.K. Dobbins with this new tag they have on him when nobody picks him up, and they have a 1-2-3 punch in the backfield with Harris, Hampton, and my boy J.K. Dobbins. I don't know. Let me know what you think. Okay, aloha, boys.
Aloha to you, Kevin, as well. But I have to sell this one. To me, the J.K. Dobbins dream is still dead. I just don't see it. I mean, then again, if he is to sign somewhere and he's not picked up, the only place he can go is the Chargers. But I mean, we just talked about it. You have, Kamani Vidal. You have someone in Rocket Sanders who's pushing to have a roster spot. You have the special teams ability of Hassan Haskins. I don't know, David. I just don't see necessarily the Chargers taking J.K. Dobbins to be their third option in this backfield to me.
Well, it's kind of like an injury insurance policy, if you want to kind of think of it that way, because if he doesn't get signed by the beginning of training camp, the only team that he can play for is the Chargers, and the Chargers don't have to sign him. They can just kind of keep him waiting in the wings, really, for anything to happen, which I think is a little bit messed up. But I mean, hey, this is the business of the NFL. The Chargers had the ability to do it. It obviously is all in an effort to try to produce a comp pick. They are hoping that there's going to be a team out there that needs a running back. And hey, if J.K. Dobbins proves that he's healthy, he proved last year that he can be productive and he can definitely help a football team win. So if he is, then I could see it. If not, he's going to be injury insurance for the Chargers for the 2025 season.
Yeah, I think there is something there, but even that is finite. Like, I believe if he doesn't sign by like week 11 or something like that, I think he just basically doesn't get to play the season. So It's kind of messed up. It doesn't feel like doing right by your players. I'm guessing they did this assuming he was going to get signed by someone and they could potentially have that factor into the comp pick formula. But that's what the other teams have to weigh by signing J.K. Dobbins now, is that it could count against their compensatory pick formula. So you'd have to have a team where it wouldn't really matter for that. But I do think if it was up to him, I don't think he'd want to come back to the Chargers after that tender, especially as the third, option. Because if they wanted to sign him over Najee Harris, they would have. They definitely aren't going to give him opportunities you wouldn't think over Omarion Hampton. So does he want to be the third option somewhere? I doubt it. I hope he signs on with an NFC team and absolutely balls out in 2025 and continues kind of, the true comeback player of the year season that he had last year when she got robbed of by Joe Burrow, who can't stay on the field for a full season and has won it twice. So let's get into more Chargers buy or sells, getting into the biggest storylines and overreactions, including how hot the seat is for Greg Roman going into year 2 and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. David, we still have more from the everydayers, and thank you to everyone who contributed on today's show, not just on Twitter at LockedOnLAC where we put a post out, but also on Instagram at LockedOnChargers where some of you guys hit us up, and also the voicemail line at 323-524-7924. And as always, thank you for making us your first listen. We'll have a mailbag show later on in the week. If your buy or sell didn't get on today, it might be on there. And make sure you also hit us up for that if you have a question that we couldn't get on today's show and you didn't get it in yet. So, David, let's start with Demetrius here because he has a question about Greg Roman's offense. And I think there's a lot of people, let's not forget how many pitchforks were out at times last year and how many frustrating games and specifically frustrating shutouts that we saw through halves of games that we had. And we've gotten a little away from the discussion. Let's hear what Demetrius has for us because I think he thinks the seat should be pretty hot in year 2 for Greg Roman.
Hey guys, Demetrius from SoCal. Buy or sell? If the second year under Greg Roman's offense comes out stale once again, do you believe Justin Herbert would have to learn another offense in year 3 under Jim Harbaugh? Love the show. Thank you so much.
David, what do you think?
Yeah, so looking at the kind of the offensive numbers for the Chargers last year, 20th in total yards, 17th in rushing yards, 19th in passing yards, and 11th in points scored. So, yeah, not great numbers, not anything that's kind of overwhelmingly positive, right? They're kind of in the middle towards the end, back end of the pack offensively. But there's one very important thing that you have to remember. The Chargers made it to the playoffs last year. And so that has some cachet. That is worth something. And so I just don't think, even if, the Chargers have another offensive season that's not up to the expectation, that the Chargers and Jim Harbaugh are going to, part ways with Greg Roman. You got to understand, this is a long-standing working relationship that these men have had at multiple different stops. So I just don't think that it's going to be a 2-year type of situation. They want that continuity. I think they expect to have a much better offense this year with a lot more weapons, but I just don't think that there's a situation that arises where they will fire him after just 2 seasons.
And stale is a very, left up for interpretation phrase
for sure.
There, right? What does stale mean? I think it would have to be a disaster. I think if the Chargers offense was a disaster in 2025, there's a chance Justin Herbert could be learning a new offense, which is not what any of us want to see, right? No. We won't want to see the 5th different offense that he's been in going into year 7. No one wants to see that. But I do always go back, and what rings in my head is Jim Harbaugh saying, like Moses, I will die leaning on my staff. And you believe him when he says it. Now, the kind of conflicting part of that is when he was at Michigan, he fired several offensive coordinators when things weren't up to standard. So the nice thing is for Greg Roman is when Jim Harbaugh was last in the league, they were going 13-3 every season just about. So there was no need to really fire him then. In Baltimore, you had Lamar Jackson winning MVPs, and it was the playoff struggles that finally got him the boot there. I think it would have to be a disaster. If it was a disaster this year, I think there's a chance he could be gone. But I think it would have to be like, hey, this isn't meeting the culture we're trying to set. This doesn't meet the standard and the higher standard we're trying to set ourselves to, because this is the main part of it. Last year, you could reasonably argue he didn't have enough. He didn't have enough firepower. He didn't have enough weapons. The protection wasn't good enough. The running attack wasn't good enough because of the players and the personnel that you had. it's going to be much, much harder to argue that this year with the weapons that they have. So there was other things like just the spacing at times was terrible. There was some decisions on key downs that led to disastrous moments in big time games. But the overall kind of hard thing to parse there is we can't sit here and criticize the personnel they had offensively and bang on the table for the Chargers to get better protection and better weapons, and then also hold that lack of those things against Greg Roman. And when he was hired, the thumbnail said Greg Noman. We want to give him a chance with these weapons. It was never a hiring that we were in favor of, but I do think it makes sense to let's see what he can do now that he has more to work with, because it was pretty good last year. And there were pretty good parts of it. I'd say the points per game was probably buoyed by a great defense.
Sure.
If it doesn't take that next step, I think it's very concerning. I think it would still have to be a disaster, though, for him to actually get booted. But I think it leads nicely to this from Instagram, Jordan Diggs saying, buy or sell if the Chargers rushing attack is below top 10, they'll be looking for a new OC. So this is something a little different, David, obviously. And I think it's more poignant because with Greg Roman, you're supposed to have a great rushing attack. I'm shaking my computer for those in the podcast. Like I'm throwing my hands in the air because his rushing attack was not good last year, which is insane given his track record. I would sell it maybe, but like it feels like it has to be better, because if you're not getting the rushing part of the Greg Roman offense, then what's the point?
100%. I mean, the calling card for Greg Roman is he produces a top 10 rushing attack, and guess what? He did it 10 straight times in a row. So like that, the proof is in the pudding, except for the first year of him being the offensive coordinator for the Chargers. Obviously, it did not happen. Now, if you're telling me that you added a first-round running back, you also grabbed Najee Harris, you also went out and got Mekhi Becton, and you're telling me you still aren't having close to a top 10 rushing attack with your pedigree, then yeah, we have some major problems, and we got some things that we really got to discuss. I still don't think it's going to lead to him being fired if they don't get to top 10 ranks, but it should go back to, it should regress to the mean, which when we're talking about the mean for him, that is a top 10 rushing attack. So hopefully we get to see that.
And I think we will. I think they will be a top 10 rushing attack this year. Maybe we'll dive deeper into that on another show. But like, it's not just that he had never been outside the top 10, which is insane to be an offensive coordinator and never to have been outside the top 10 in rushing yards in a season. To do that 10 straight years in the NFL, it's a testament. And it's the one kind of saving grace we had with the hire was like, at least you're going to get a great rushing attack. The Chargers didn't get that. 17th in rushing yards doesn't sound terrible, but considering what his track record is, it is pretty terrible. And also, it was so inconsistent that a couple of games where they went absolutely bonkers covers up a lot of the just putrid games and the total inconsistency with that unit. But not only had he never finished outside the top 10, David, he had only finished outside the top 4 twice in 11 seasons, once before last year. They were literally twice as bad last year than they've ever been in a Greg Roman rushing attack. The craziest part is they have only, the previous worst was 8th. That was the worst they had ever done besides that. His teams have led the league in rushing 4 times. They have more times leading the league in rushing overall than they've had outside of the top 8, which has only been twice.
Wild.
Which is crazy, but it also makes you even more frustrated. Like, I'm saying good stats, but sounding angry while I'm saying it, because the Chargers didn't have that last year, and we kind of assumed that they would. But I think it'll be much better. Let's get to this one. How much better will it be from Adam Sedai, who says, buy or sell, the Chargers will rush for more touchdowns than they will have receiving touchdowns. Buy or sell that.
Yeah, I'm going to sell that one. I don't think that's going to happen. I think last year, like, it was 23 touchdowns, passing touchdowns to 17 rushing touchdowns.
Closer than I thought.
Yeah, that was definitely closer than I thought, but also that's a down year passing touchdown-wise for Justin Herbert. I know, obviously, he was fantastic at protecting the football with only the 3 interceptions, and also, I think we need to remind everybody that they didn't really open the offense up until like 6 or 7 games into the season. And I don't think that they're going to wait as long to kind of unleash Justin Herbert's arm this season, especially now when you're a lot more loaded up with weapons to be able to attack through the passing game. So I don't think that they're going to neglect the passing game. I do feel like, hey, in 2013, the 49ers did have a kind of a closer balance, 21 passing touchdowns to 18 rushing touchdowns, with obviously Greg Roman as the offensive coordinator. So they do and they won a couple of playoff games that year, got to the conference championship. So, they do, I'm sure they want some of that balance there, but they also need to understand the talent that they have at quarterback, and they need to put it in his hands a little bit more often and trust that he can be able to get the ball in the end zone.
I'm selling it as well, but I think the only thing, devil's advocate, I could say to that was, like, it was very clear early on in the season that the Chargers were fine with letting Justin Herbert be a game manager and letting their running attack be the focal point of this offense. There's a deep part of me that thinks that if they could, they would run it 40 times a game, and they don't care if Justin Herbert throws it 15 times a game. That's not what the offense should be, right? You should be using a good rushing attack to get the most out of Justin Herbert's insane passing ability, and that's always what it should be. And it would be nice to see him have a great rushing attack. We're still waiting for it. Going into year 6, we're still waiting for it. Now, that being said, even if I think the Chargers will run the ball more, which could potentially lead to, passing it less than they were, especially later on in the season when they did open things up, I expect Justin Herbert to have, especially with more weapons this year, more than the 23 touchdowns that he had last season's passing. And the most touchdowns by a Greg Roman team is 24. So I don't see Justin Herbert getting less than 24 passing touchdowns. So I think that I have to sell it, because I do think he should be pushing 30 passing touchdowns, because I do think the lack of weapons really showed up in the red zone. And I think that really cost him a lot of passing touchdowns that he probably should have had last year. And I'm sure if we went back and counted the drop touchdowns, it would probably be a much different number. The Jalen Reagor one is the one that always stands out in my head, which should have been a 50-plus yard touchdown turned into a touchback. But I do think the Chargers will have a better rushing attack. Will they have an LT-like 30 rushing touchdown season? I highly doubt that. But I do think it's going to be better. So I don't think we're going to be having these same conversations. If we are having the same conversations, oh my God, I really, really hope that we're not, because that'll mean things are not going the way they should offensively with a Justin Herbert-led offense. But that's going to wrap things up for today's show. Tomorrow, make sure you guys are back, because I think we're going to be looking back at the 2024 draft class and giving some grades of what those players have done, with obviously some easy A's to give out with guys like Ladd McConkey and Joe Alt. But what do you do with someone like a Junior Colson? We're going to be getting into that. To make sure you don't miss it, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel, and listen wherever you get your podcast from. And also make sure you're contributing on the mailbag show, which will probably be Thursday's show. So we'll put a post out on Wednesday, or you guys can call into the voicemail line at 323-524-7924 and give us your 30-second Chargers question. If you leave a 30-second voicemail, you're more likely to get on the show. We love having you guys call in, get your voices on the show, having that old AM sports radio feel to it. But you can also hit us up at Locked On Chargers on Instagram, like we had several people do today, or our Locked On Chargers Facebook page as well. And we post the show to all of those places too. So make sure you guys are back here tomorrow, where we're regrading the 2024 draft class after one season. But until then, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.